Hello, welcome to today's how-to video. Hey, I'm about to start working on my 8th rifles, and I figured while I'm doing this I might as well show you how I do the basing. Now the basing for the 8th rifles is going to be a little more forest or rougher scrub kind of terrain as compared to the 10th Dragoons, which is mostly grass type. So I want to kind of show you how I go about doing these more foliage-based terrain pieces or bases. All right, first off, you're going to need a kind of a base of ground foam, fine ground foam. Now I use Woodland Scenics. This is an example of their light green bushes, but these are kind of packages their ground foam come in. Now what I usually do is transfer them to jars so that I can more easily dispense them. We're going to start with, this is essentially a mix I've already prepared. This is going to be part of the base. Essentially I'm going to be using their light green turf. They call it turf, fine ground foam, and then a little bit of this dark green. Okay. But I've also happened to have kind of a blend I've been working on, but it's mostly built around this tan, it looks like crushed walnut shells, essentially. See if I can get a good view, good zoom in on that. Now the reason I'm going to use these, this is not the same as rock, because you can actually tell, your eye can pick up the difference between the flatter wood texture of the shell compared to the an actual rock, because they do have ballast in the Woodland Scenics range that is actually rock. So this is more ground walnut, and so we're going to start with that base. I'm going to put it into a lid from a gloss coat. Now you have to be careful. There is a single hole in the top. I guess it's for air. So you'll want to put tape over it in the back. That way you don't end up spilling the stuff. Alright, start. I'm just going to dump. There we go. Okay. And I said there's some colors already in there. I'm not really going to want these tufts. Now these larger tufts are in there for when I'm terrain scenicking, basically. The edge stuff, like the edge around the edge of a building or what have you, or in a field. So I'll take those out for now. But what I'm going to do is add in a little bit of the green, dark green. Let's go ahead and leave it zoomed in like that. Oh, this is light green first. Okay. We don't want to cover it up too much. And this is something you do one step at a time. Okay, don't rush. You can always put more in, but taking more out is difficult. I'm going to try some of the dark green. I'm not going to add any more dark green. Most of the colors should be light. Now I'm going to mix this up very heavily. I prefer using some wood type dowels or what have you. This allows the base material to look like the walnuts start to take on the look of the like leaf litter. So as you can see, okay, that's still a lot more of the walnut shell than ground turf. So we're going to add more turf. I'm going to stick with more of the light green. Alright, there we go. That's a better mix. Okay. And again, clean out debris. That must have been in the bottom of the container. I've had this particular walnut mix around for years. So it could be the plastic in the container was getting a little worn. I can't figure out where it's coming from. Okay. Alright. So that's a good mix with a little bit of the leaf litter thrown in. I'm very satisfied with that. Alright, so there's the difference between the basing material I use for my 10th Dragoons, which is mostly light green with a little bit of the dark green, and I mean just a little bit, with some of the clay that I've got. There's clay material that I've got there. That's a little bit of that's mixed in there as well. So that's more for the open ground, and you can see the difference. So the bases are going to definitely look different, and I think this will match the colors of the Hessian strip and very, very nicely. This will be a good complement. All right, so let's kind of get started. Once you've got your mix, now you're going to want to do some, gather some other, what I'll call accents. All right, so first, we're going to use Army Painter's Woodland Tuft green strips. That'll be a part of the base. We're going to use Gamer's Grass Moss. That's a very low, kind of a medium dark green. We're going to use the Woodland Snake's Bushes Light Green. This is really clump foliage. Okay. Alright. And then we will sparingly use some old lichen. So with very little, small pieces, you get an interesting variation compared to the static grass. And so we're going to do that. Alright, so let's try to, now it's all in stages, so first thing we're going to do is base all of our minis on this with this light mix. Okay, now use your favorite PVA glue. I happen to use wood glue, Carpenter's wood glue. As long as it's PVA, that's all you need. And you use a toothpick. Okay, that's how you're going to distribute the glue on the surface. So let's go ahead and we'll start with one of our sergeants. Okay, start by putting a little bit of the white glue on the base. A little drop like that. Okay. And then what we do is use a toothpick to spread it around. And use a rolling motion. That's the way I prefer to do it, because it spreads it very, very slowly then and evenly. You can push it along, and then you can use the tip of this to work it into the smaller detailed places like around his shoe without getting it all over his boot. Let's do a little bit of a zoom here. Okay, and flipping it over. You can use the toothpick to draw this through to here. Again, picking it up with a rolling motion. Rolling it on there. Okay. Okay. That looks pretty good. This is also a lot easier than doing it with a brush, because the brush will have to stop and clean, wash off. Here you don't need to. If you need this, if there's anything to do, you just need to grab a napkin rubber and just clean off the tip. That's it. But you don't have to do that very often. Once you've got the white glue down, it's just a matter of running it in there. And then just tapping it around, shaking it around. If you want, you can take your, some tweezers or knife blade and just press the mix down, and then there you go. So that is the base coat. Now you'll notice the difference here. It's a lot of times you'll see the models having mostly a sand base with foliage accenting. This is more foliage with the rock looking parts, accenting it. In this case, accenting it as leaf litter. Okay. Alright, so now we just go through the rest of the models and do that. So I'll go through, get a few of those done, and we'll come back. Alright. Alright, now we got all of them done. I've got all 15 completed based this way. Now, as you can see, if you really want to, you can stop right here. You don't have to go any further. Of course, I'm going to, and we will continue in this video. But if you're just wanting a nice quick base, there you go. Now, if you are going to stop here, the next step after you let the PVA completely dry is to use something like Tester's Dull Coat to overspray. Using this will help seal it together and actually help the different particles bond together one to another, and you'll be a much stronger finish, much like your paint. Okay. All right, so we're going to let this dry just a little bit. You don't have to. You can dive right in the next step if you want right now, but I want to give it a couple minutes to dry, say 5 or so, and then we'll come right back. All right, now we get to the fun stuff. Now, this is, like I said, there's the materials that I said we're going to use earlier. You can use any number of materials. These are the ones I intend to use for these particular models. Now, the one thing that you want to do, unlike the first approach where we went ahead and we just did the base terrain on all the bases, what you want to do is do each model individually, do all the pieces you're going to put on it one at a time, because you want to balance it. You want to basically build the base the way you want it to look. Instead of going through, like for example, we don't want to go through and put all the lichen on all the little bases, and then go back and do all the bushes on the little bases, and then go back and do all these tufts on the bases. Because what you end up doing is you end up losing sight of how that base will look when all the pieces are together. So kind of like when you're doing any type of a model build, you want to focus on the model individually and add the things that are going to make it look the way you want it to. So we're going to go ahead and just use one of these. We're going to use my light mortar, and we'll go ahead and walk through this. So let's start with him. The very first thing I'm going to start with is the lichen. Looking through, you're going to find yourself the piece that you're wanting to get. Now this is kind of it's been used a bit, so there's some of it's not quite ideal for this, but there are still a few parts in here that are going to work like this. That will work really well. So I am going to cut this free. Alright, so here's the model. I try to place this where it would look the way I want it to. Now, so I'm going to start there. Notice I'm not gluing it. I'm going to grab some of my bushes, light green bushes. Just grab a couple of these. Small pieces. And now I'll go ahead and some of this gamer grass. Now this is the moss. So we'll start with this one here. I think that's just don't need to be too big. Set that forward. And then, see, the back is kind of bare. I think what I want to do is move this around like that. Put this more to the side here. moss there. Let's take a look at the Army Painter sheet. And I'll grab one of the small ones. And I'll put it right there, for example. I think that'll do okay. Yeah. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Alright, so now that I know what I want where, I leave them in place. Now I get my white glue, or PVA, and here is where I'm going to take, unzoom for a minute so you'll be more easily able to see. Okay, so I'm going to take this open, make sure it's clear. Alright, I'm going to pick this up, turn it over, and I'm going to use this to place the white glue directly on. Right there. Okay, so boom. And then place it right back down and press it in real well. Okay. Alrighty, from there we go. Okay, so that's how he looks now. Alright, so now we'll go with the moss. And that's the approach. I'll go ahead and zoom in now a bit. We'll do the moss piece next. Alright, so there we go. That is the unit. Now you see it needs to dry. Okay. But he looks real good. So this is going to dry up. Once the PVA is completely dry, then what you're going to do is you're going to take the dull coat again, a nice flat lacquer, and varnish it. That again helps bind the material together, not only to the base, but to each other, and kind of gives us a little bit of rigidity, so it'll stand up to a little bit more abuse. But there is my 8th rifle base completed. That's how I go about basing my minis. So, alright, hope you learned a little bit from that. If you want to see more, please let me know, and I'll suggest other techniques or things you may want me to review, and I'll go ahead and try to do that. So thanks a lot for sticking with me. Do share this with any of your friends who maybe are struggling with doing some basing, and see if maybe it'll inspire them to get their models based up. Alright, thanks a lot. See you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.